Hello and welcome everybody to How Clinic's Community Health and Wellness Night open discussion. Tonight's talk is going to be unlocking restful nights. So we're going to understand a little bit about sleep and sleep apnea for better health. And what better person to have here today than Dr. Lee with his first profession as respiratory and sleep medicine to give us some information here as we go through, because who doesn't want to have a better night's sleep? And where I find the most joy out of this, Dr. Lee, is sleep is my habit. Sleep is my hobby, sorry. Sleep forever. So love to hear more about this as we get going. So I'm just going to stop this share here. And I see a few of our folks entering on board today, which is lovely. I'm wondering if you guys can find your chat down there and just send us a hello. And want to send that out. So it's out to host and panelists. So I've got to get it out to everybody. Let me do a proper hello there to you. And what I want you to do is, if you guys have the opportunity, if you do have any sleep questions that you would like us to go over, is to pop it in here in our webinar chats. So we can try to cover this as much as possible. Tonight, what we're going to go over is just a brief introduction there. We're going to talk about the importance of sleep and the pillars of sleep itself, a little bit about the science of it. We're going to talk about sleep apnea itself. I'm just scrolling down here, understanding sleep apnea and diagnosis of sleep apnea as well, along with treating some of these sleep elements as we go on through. So I'm excited to see, as I said, it's my hobby. I love it. Can't get more. And in what a week. This is where I've had the least sleep. And I can only imagine what it's doing to my body as it goes. And we'll hear a little bit more about what that will bring us as well. So welcome to those participants. And so where I'm going to start is in that introduction tonight. So we're here to talk about sleep, and where I'm going to just kind of touch and give a few brief points before we go is going to be around how it can help out our physical health, our mental health, and our emotional well-being itself. So I've done some digging around. We talk about sleep in here often. I am not as an expert as Dr. Lee, nor have I spent as that much school time there. But today, the physical health portion of it, I'm going to touch points here on how it can help on cellular repair and growth. So I'm not going to talk about, we'll talk about energy and these type of things, but I wanted to tap into things that maybe you guys aren't quite sure about or knew about. But during our sleep itself, that growth hormone levels peak, stimulating the cell division and repair and that regeneration. So when we talk about the essential elements of sleeping helping you grow, it's actually tapping into that field there. So it's essential for that healing of tissues and muscles and cell damage through the day. It can also help out too, along with your immune system function. So I don't know if you guys have ever noticed when, your lack of sleep and all of a sudden you start to get sick, depending on how much sleep that you've got at that time, because sleep itself helps enhance these immune cells' activities. So for example, T cells, which identify and eliminate infected cells, become more efficient during sleep. So sleep is also a healing period within that. So cytokines, which are proteins that help fight infection, are also released and enhance the immune response. So even more reason to sleep. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to sleep tonight. Hormonal regulation. Well, we all need a little bit of hormonal regulation. So the hypothalamus part of our brain there helps control these sleep cycles and releases hormones. And we also have hormones such as ghrelin. So we've talked about ghrelin before, which stimulates our hunger hormone, and leptin, which is also a satiety hormone. So during sleep, these can help with our regulation. And when we think late nights, staying up, we all get a little bit of hunger. We all get that tapped in there. Let's go to sleep and help those regulate a little bit better. But sleep regulates those hormones, keeping that energy balance as well. But then we've got the energy restoration. So that's why I praise sleep, is because I like to wake up feeling restored. Not every day I do. And hopefully there's reasons we can learn about of where, why we may not get this full restorative sleep, but these energy cells itself replenish during sleep.
Mhm.
Restoring energy levels for cellular functions and reducing oxidative stress, so stress within the body, which damage these cells.
Mhm.
That's a little bit about that physical proportion, but there's so much more. That was just the physical
Mhm.
body. We got mental health. So I don't know if you guys have ever experienced your mood change with sleep. Mine does. Oh, my house can definitely know, maybe around here as well, if I've got less sleep, not just the face and the eyes, but looking at my mood itself. But sleep and mental health. So when we sleep, it actually helps grow new neurons. So that is neurogenesis itself, particularly in the hippocampus, which is a brain center for memory. When we're tired, we may not remember or have word recall problems, but when we're well rested, we're able to kind of make goals and remember things a lot clearly as we go. But it helps strengthen these connections, which are necessary for learning and memory. When we think about kids, we think about school and making sure our kids are in sleep appropriately so they can go to school, they can be educated appropriately. We need to think about ourselves. And I was actually listening to the radio the other day, and they were talking about actually changing school times, or the idea of changing school time for kids. This wake up period of starting school at 9 a.m. is wonderful. We start work at 9. Let's get the kids going as well. But they're actually stating that they may, if they had the perfect world, they would probably put that time a little bit later for teens,
Mhm.
start around 10 a.m. to allow them to have
Mhm.
proper sleep.
Mhm.
As we know, it'd be nice to put your teen to bed at like 10 p.m., but it's a work in progress. Same with ourselves of trying to get to bed on time. So it's quite interesting there.
Yeah.
Other part of your mental health and sleep itself is the waste clearance of the body in the mind itself. So this is most actively during sleep, which clears out these waste products associated with Alzheimer's, actually. Our sleep in this connection is quite large, and sleep can actually help prevent these toxin buildups and protect us against neurodegenerative diseases as that goes. We have neurotransmitters in the brain, so we have these wonderful nerves that send messages back and forth. And this neurotransmitter regulation is more talking about dopamine, serotonin, I can't get that one out. Can you
Epinephrine. Yeah.
norepinephrine. I just had
Okay.
to slow it down. My mouth likes to move fast, which regulates mood. Okay, so we did speak about that briefly, but sleep itself helps balance out these hormones. Then we have emotional and well-being. So we've moved from the mental health side of things, and it's very similar. So it's all about rebalancing, regenerating
Mhm.
as we go through our sleep. And not only does it beauty sleep, we talk about that often, but the beauty is actually happening within. We can carry ourselves with much better grace as that goes. So our emotional well-being, yes, it can help our prefrontal cortex. So we've got places in our brain that are responsible for the rational thinking. We're not quite rational when we're tired. I know I'm not. So it helps that balance in our stress hormones. So cortisol's within there as well. So that's just a little recap. I really wanted to touch on those pieces because sleep is more than what we think it is. And I haven't really touched anything. We'll talk a little bit about how it can help with weight regulation and different things as we get going, but we really do want to focus on these aspects as we get going. So that is our feature. Oops, scrolling the wrong screen is for our section 1 in our intro. And now we're actually onto the science of sleep. And that's why I've got Dr. Lee here today. Because I know I love certain aspects of my sleep. I love
Mhm.
dreaming. That's why I go. I have, it's my own world. Nothing bothers me there.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if you can explain the sleep stages, REM
Yeah.
and non-REM, and the
Sure.
significance of those stages itself.
Yeah. So you've touched on, the aspects of sleep and all those systems and stuff like that, but really there is no system, no cell that is actually not affected by sleep in general. And the cool study was about 8, 10 years ago. that what they identified, we've all heard of circadian rhythm, right? Circadian rhythm is our, nocturnal and diurnal sleep, right? So wakefulness and sleep stages. And so when we think about the organism itself, we think, well, us as an individual, we're a collection of multitude billions of cells, trillions of cells, etc. That we don't think about like these individuals' systems having circadian rhythm, or the cells themselves that make up the system actually have a circadian rhythm. And, we think about ourselves having circadian rhythm means like we go to bed, let's say maybe 10 o'clock, and you get up at 6 o'clock, whatever maybe. And that's our circadian rhythm, right? And so we play to that tune. But as a matter of fact, each and every cell of our body has an optimal time of function. That's a circadian rhythm. So it's like a sleep time when they're resting, turnover time of the cells and stuff like that. And so when we disrupt our own circadian rhythm, we disrupt the cell's circadian rhythm to the cell. And they actually found a molecule that actually regulates, and that's how cool this is, right? So every single cell actually has their own circadian rhythm, and obviously these systems have a very similar set of cells. And so the system actually has its own circadian rhythm. For example, if you have your GI system, if you're eating late before you go to bed, when you're supposed to be sleeping, but you're actually be digesting, and when you eat food, it can take as long as 6 to 8 hours before the food empties your stomach, particularly having a protein-heavy diet, right? Before bed. So if, for a lot of people, sometimes they eat something before go to bed because it makes them feel a little drowsy and tired. That's, obviously it's a learned behavior, right? A classical conditioning. But what happens is that actually when the gut is supposed to be digesting and turn over the cells and stuff, and naturally, it can't do that. And so it has to digest the food first. And by the time you wake up, by the time the morning comes, it's digested the food. Yeah, maybe it has an hour or so perhaps to actually do its thing. And so we actually are disrupting the natural process of the food. So that's just an example for you with respect to kind of the systems and stuff like that that need
I'm
circadian rhythm. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question in regard to the circadian rhythm itself. Like,
Mhm.
how long does it take to change that rhythm for you? Because,
Yeah.
my rhythm's late at night. I've trained
Mhm.
it that way. And unfortunately,
Mhm.
I do want to
Mhm.
forward more, but
Mhm.
it just means me laying there. But like, how long would it take to
Mhm.
change?
Yeah, there's no like, like exact number, Sam. It'd be a range. Typically I would always tell my patients it's months to do that, weeks to months, typically, 3 months or more. It's not just your circadian rhythm you're changing your behavior too as well. That triggers your circadian rhythm. For example, you watch a movie every night, that sets a tone for your sleep routine. So, or if you have a cup of tea, that's a set routine, or if you have a hot shower, hot bath, and stuff like that, 2 hours before you go to sleep, that sets your routine for sleep, right? And so you actually have to change your entire behavioral system for sleep itself. But what's maybe more important, Sam, is how we change your circadian rhythm too as well, or how we approach it. And I'll talk about that a little later, just remind me. But I'm gonna get back to the sleep stages, and because we see a lot of this in my clinic, because we do a lot of sleep studies. And so we typically think that and we normally in the past teach that REM sleep and slow wave sleep or deep sleep is the most important. So what happens when you go to sleep? So you go from wakefulness and then you transition to sleep. It's a transition. It's not a light switch, by the way. And so you have to remember that, right? And so a lot of things can happen in the transition period. And so you're kind of having some sleep waves, some wakefulness waves. Some cool things can happen throughout that stage because you're kind of dreaming and you're not maybe dreaming, and your surrounding, we might have a bit of hallucinations as well that can happen. We may have a bit of paralysis as we fall asleep. We lose a bit of muscle tone. And so we go sleep onset paralysis. That's the reason, right? That's the reason why we have this. But people think, I'm just going to close my eyes and pass out. That doesn't happen all the time. It can, right? But it's a transition. So when we look at your sleep night, we look at what we call a hypnogram, right? And so hypnograms are basically their stages of sleep. So we go through what we call non-REM sleep and REM sleep, right? And those are the two major classifications of stage of sleep. And so the non-REM sleep includes 4 stages of sleep. So stage 1, which is very, very light stages of sleep. stage 2, kind of a little more deep, and stage 3, deep sleep. And the frequency of the waves become slower and slower and slower. And when you get to stage 3 and 4, we clump it down to what we call slow wave sleep, because you're doing 3-4 hertz per second of these waves. And that's called your deep sleep. And then you have your REM sleep. So what happens is we go from wakefulness, and then we go stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we hit REM sleep, right? And then we go back to like 1, 2, 3, 4, and we do this 3 to 5 times throughout the night. And that's kind of what we typically would see. So you should have 3 to 5 sessions of REM sleep. You should have 3 to 5 sessions of deep sleep and non-REM sleep too as well, right? Sorry, that stage 1 and 2 sleep. But what happens is that sometimes these get disrupted. So typically we would see our REM sleep happen between 60 to 90 minutes from sleep onset time. And typically we wake up around REM sleep. And typically we can remember the last dream is because we wake up close to that time, or sometimes we wake up during REM sleep, and it's very vivid. And REM sleep tends to be, the dreams tend to be more vivid, right? And so more clear, and it seems very real. It's almost like, oh, it's like it happened in real life. So if you wake someone during REM sleep, that's kind of what happens. And we call it REM sleep, is rapid eye movement. So you look at your children, if you watch them sleep long enough, the eyes will dart back and forth. And that just tells us that they're in rapid eye movement sleep. So the only thing that moves is your eyes, and you lose muscle tone to the rest of the body. That's a protective mechanism. So we go through 3 to 5 stages of sleep. So you have to know what normal sleep is in order to identify abnormal sleep, right? And so what happens is some people have insomnia. And so when we say insomnia, we say, well, difficulties with sleep. And so typically we can break it down in 2 types of insomnia. So we have sleep initiation, so meaning it takes you a longer time to fall asleep. And so for most of us, we would be able to fall asleep within 30 minutes, which is actually a pretty long time. So, some people want to fall asleep right away, and they can't, and get very anxious and get worked up. And what happens? So they create their own insomnia, right? And so, or it's when some people, are very tired and they're used to going to sleep late, but they're trying to go sleep early to make up their sleep or to get a better sleep. Well, your body's already used to like maybe a later hours of sleep, and you're trying to go sleep an hour earlier. Good luck, right? Without slowly transitioning it, you're going to create that insomnia too as well. So there is actually a learned behavior as well with respect to insomnia. And then that's why, when you're saying, when you change your circadian rhythm, how long does it take? It's a hard number to peg, but it ranges typically months to correct sleep. It takes a long time. So the other part of insomnia is actually insomnia with sleep maintenance. So once you fall asleep, and you stay asleep, and that's where we have a lot of trouble, or you can have a bit of both too as well, right? So what happens is sometimes when you have problems staying asleep, you create anxiety falling asleep. And that happens so often. People actually don't want to go to sleep until they're exhausted, right? And what happens is they push their sleep time later and later, but they have to get up for work, so they're tired, and it's a very vicious circle when it comes to sleep, right? And so a lot of what we see, and there's lots of reasons for sleep issues with insomnia, sleep issues with sleep maintenance as well. And that's why you need, to see a sleep specialist if you have problems with respect to your sleep. So the stage of sleep, we can divide into 2, non-REM and REM sleep, and together, that completes one cycle. We basically go through 3 to 5 cycles of this per night. Now, what happens when you have disruption in your sleep as a result of that, right? And so what happens is you actually disrupt your stages of sleep. That's the first thing that really happens, right? And so we typically would have 60, 90 minutes total of REM sleep. And then we have about, maybe an hour, a little 45 minutes of deep sleep. And so the proportions of sleep, we can quantify in a sleep lab. And so that's why we put all these brain waves onto you. So we kind of know when you're sleeping, when you're not sleeping. We don't care when you're not sleeping. And so typically, in the middle age, you're looking at about 20-25% of your total sleep time being REM sleep. And you're looking at about 15% around the time of your deep sleep is that. And then the rest is your light stages of 1 and 2 stages of sleep, right? As you get a little older, the REM sleep decreases a little bit. As you get a little older, your deep sleep decreases a little bit, and your non-REM, your stage 1 and 2, sorry, increases a little bit too as well, right? So it's not a huge shift. But the key is that, people think, well, I'm older, they don't need as much sleep. That's false. You still need about 7 hours of sleep, even when you're 80, even you're 70, even you're 60. As an adult, it doesn't change too much, right? In terms of the amount of sleep we actually require. And so there is what we call a U-shaped curve with respect to sleep. And so, we say, well, you try to, minimum is 6 hours of sleep, maximum 9 hours. And why do we say that? Well, the epidemiological studies show that when you have less sleep, less than 6 hours, your mortality goes up. So it means you die younger. And when you have more than 9 hours sleep, it's the exact same thing. So there's a ultimate good amount of sleep, and that's the average is actually between 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And we hear a lot about the people who are very busy or very energetic. They usually business people and stuff like that, executives and whatnot. Oh, they can get away with 5 hours sleep and stuff, like function the same. That's not true, actually. Even though they feel they function the same, and what they've done is they've done actually studies to look at the reaction time. When they get 5 hours sleep versus 6 hours or 7 hours sleep with opportunity sleep, they actually perform better with reaction time too as well, right? So it's a very interesting study. And the best to identify these individuals that they're being more tired than they're supposed to be is actually just watch them at the end of the day. When they come home and everything's said and done, they watch TV and they tend to doze off right away, right? Because the body can't handle it, right? The body needs, your body will tell you what it needs. And you really actually have to listen to your body. If you're tired, go to bed, you know what I mean? And so they just close their eyes and like, oh, it's like a power nap. But why do you need the power nap? And what's the purpose of sleep? And Sam mentioned a lot of this stuff leads to, well, what's the main reason for sleep? Well, the easiest way to think about sleep in general is just that it gives you enough strength, vitality to get through your day, basically, to function properly, right? Like mentally, physically, all that thing that Sam mentioned is super important, right? And so if you are tired part of the day or towards the evening, like at 7 or 8 o'clock, and your bedtime is like 10 o'clock per se, maybe you're not getting adequate hours of sleep in general, right? And so you might need a little more hours of sleep. And so that's kind of, for me, that's the easiest way to think about sleep in general. And it does affect every single system in your body, from your mental health, your the central nervous system, and what Sam was alluding to about the neurodegenerative disorders. And it's very true. We know that people who have less sleep tend to have more Alzheimer's too as well. And it's actually in the stage 3 sleep that we do have this kind of cleansing of our brain, because, you think about it, the brain consumes about 10 to 20% of the glucose, the energy that we need, right? It's a powerhouse of energy, right? And it's going to produce a lot of chemical reactions. Where are the waste products going to go if you don't have a waste system? And so it's actually your sleep. Your sleep is your waste system. That's when the garbage man comes out and collects all the crap that we've ate during the day, drank during the day, inhaled during the day, all these chemical reactions. It has to gotten rid of, right? And so it's
We plug our phones in at night. Why don't we plug ourselves in? That's what we're doing,
it's actually
right?
true, yeah. So it's your deep sleep, that actually affects that too as well. And why the stages of sleep are very important. Even if you have actually 7 to 8 hours of sleep, your proportion of stages of sleep are not that good, or not really proportional per se. So if, for example, you have like maybe 5% of deep sleep or no deep sleep, you actually will still feel tired despite having 7 to 8 hours of sleep. So you actually need all the stages of sleep, right? It's very important. So we used to think that, we only need deep sleep or REM sleep, but actually the light stages of sleep, stage 1 and 2, are also important. They're involved in a lot of some of the learning process too as well. They're involved also in some of the, in the cleaning process of the brain too, as well, right? So all those stages of sleep. What are some of the other things that affect your sleep? Obviously, The environment matters as well, right? So, unfortunately, hot flashes, when you're hot, that can affect your quality of sleep. So, we call these external influencers of sleep, right? So your partner can affect your quality of sleep. There's a study, is really interesting. They looked at couples who have different beds, not different rooms, just different beds. And they look at, how long they live for. And what they found was there's a correlation with partners who sleep in separate beds actually live longer than people who sleep in the same bed. Because obviously, there's a disruption, with respect to the sleep in general, right? What are the things that can disrupt your quality sleep? Obviously, what I do predominantly is sleep apnea, and so let's talk about sleep apnea in general because
May I pop in before you
yeah, for
talk
sure.
about sleep up? Because I know that's going to be a good section that I want to talk about, because that's one of the reasons we're here tonight. But I wanted to just play just briefly in the common reasons why people wake up through night. And I wanted to talk about, this is more to my female population out here, but around the hormonal changes itself.
Mm.
When it comes down to estrogen and progesterone. When it comes to our hormonal changes, menstruation, you will actually notice, I don't know if there's any ladies out there, I significantly do, is that buildup when we see that change of these hormones coming, that you require more sleep or feel more tired as that goes on as well. But, your progesterone and your estrogen actually play quite a significant role in this wake up and balance as you go. So don't think, it's just all these features. Your hormones can actually start to change as the body temperature regulates with the hormones itself, while progesterone's a more calming and sleep-inducing effect. Estrogen promotes different factors within the body itself as well. Just wanted to cover that because I thought that was quite interesting, because it made me reflect back of how else can one track their period is going to be watching their sleep and the pattern, the tiredness of that goes on. There's a few other points within there, but I will let Dr. Lee get back into the sleep apnea side of things, because I will share out, the other things such as your stress and anxiety, your physical discomfort. Well, that one can be pretty obvious. Got a sore shoulder, sore neck or back, we get interrupted. Dr. Lee said around the environmental, urination. Okay. You talked about age and different of sleep and interruptions, but the bladder, I swear it shrinks over the time, and it is a disruptor within there that we can definitely discuss as needed with our patients as it goes on by. But your dietary factors, what you eat, can also change how you sleep before bed, and your cortisol levels. So I just wanted to jump in there because I don't think I could have found another way to loop that in. So please take us away on the sleep apnea. And did you want me to let me know when you want me to share the
Sure.
reports there for you to, as
Yeah,
well?
yeah. So sleep apnea obviously is what I do predominantly, and the reason for that is it's so prevalent in our population, right? It ranges from 18 to some, like, so 8% and 12%. That's usually the range, but we've seen as high as like a 20-24% prevalence in the world, in the world, right? But unfortunately, as we get older, our sleep apnea prevalence increases, right? So as we get older, we have more sleep apnea, right? And part of the reason for that is just, we lose a lot of muscle tone, etc. with some of these growth hormones. But you think about just kind of natural, as we get older, we tend to gain a little more weight, we have more excess money and stuff, all that kind of stuff, right? So that's the easiest way to think about that. But we look at the obesity pandemic too as well. The sleep apnea often affects it. Now, having said that, though, it's not a direct correlation. So I've seen two people today who have a very high BMI have very mild sleep apnea. So, for example, I actually have sleep apnea, right? I use a CPAP machine. I have a mild case of it. I find benefits with it. And so there are two things that affect sleep apnea, right? And so what is sleep apnea, basically? So there's a couple of types of sleep apnea. The two main ones are basic obstructive sleep apnea. That's 99% what I deal with. So obstructive is this physical obstruction of somewhere in your airway. Okay, so it's typically in the throat region when things collapse onto each other. Central sleep apnea is the brain doesn't fire to breathe at a particular rate. And a lot of times that's associated with cardiovascular diseases such as congestive heart failure, people have heart attacks, people have weak heart pumping, people have atrial fibrillation too as well, are people with strokes that affects their breathing pattern, that affects their homeostasis. And so a lot of times, the central sleep is related to that. Now, there are some medication that can affect that, particularly narcotics and benzodiazepines can affect your central nervous system, that can affect that type of system. But the predominant what we deal with is obstructive sleep, so the physical obstruction of your airway. So what happens then with the sleep apnea in general when it gets obstructed, right? And so basically you lack a bit of air, and so then the oxygen starts to drop. And when the oxygen starts to drop, well, what happens is a fight or flight response, right? And so you just think about like auto choking, right? So if someone's choking yourself and you choke yourself, it's a very distressful kind of situation. And so what happens, your heart rate starts to go up, your blood pressure tends to go up too as well. And you have what they call arousal response, or changes in brainwave activity that will start to open up your airway. So you shift to a lighter stage of sleep typically when that happens, right? Or you have changes in brainwave frequency that affects the muscle tone in the airway. And so that's why when you have sleep apnea, what we typically see is that individuals stay more in the light stages of sleep, right? And so when we start to correct that, that's kind of what happens. And so when we have this fight or flight response, what's the consequence of that? Well, that's very similar to you seeing a bear coming at you, right? So what happens to us, our sympathetic nervous system goes up, blood pressure goes up, heart rate goes up, your adrenal glands works out like crazy, pumping a lot of glucose and all that kind of stuff. And so it's not as extreme as that, but it's a low grade like that over time, right? But it's chronic. And so you can have difficulty breathing less than 5 times an hour, which is normal. So most of us have a degree of sleep apnea. You can have up to 15 or more, which is moderate, or 30 and up, which is severe. We've had people, I've seen people over 160 events per hour of breathing difficulties. And so those individuals are much, much, much more severe, obviously, right? So over time, that creates chronic stress to the body, just like we have chronic stress in life. This is all night, right? Every night, every hour we sleep. If you don't treat it, it continues to go. And that's why it affects our metabolism over time, right? Just like, fat deposition with chronic cortisol, it tends to be more central obesity too as well. We have adrenal fatigue. You've heard that term used too as well. We have changes in our catecholamines, epinephrine too as well, but all these things. We have changes in our heart rate tone too as well. So it affects all of that, right? And as a result, what happens is then it affects our endocrine system on top of that too. So our ghrelin levels do change with sleep apnea. Our satiety do change with sleep apnea too as well. And all those over time, obviously affect every other part of our system indirectly, right? So that's why when sleep apnea is left untreated, there's increased risk of heart disease, stroke, hypertension, arrhythmias, metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, all these things. And so that's why it's so important for us to correct our sleep first as a foundation, for weight management, particularly, right? And so I mentioned, the 2 main things that kind of affect our sleep. So one is, our physiological relaxation of the muscle. So all of us, when we fall asleep, our muscles always release a bit of muscle tone. And what happens is, the airway will collapse into each other, right? And so everybody's different. So mine might be more than Sam might be more than mine. And also the way it collapses versus like, if it's a circular versus like this way or this way. And that's why we gravitate to different positions of sleep to accommodate these collapses or degree of sleep apnea too as well. And the last thing is just crowdedness in the face and the pharynx and stuff like that. So, if there's impedance of airflow, well, you're going to get less airflow. So if you have big tonsils, big tongues, big cheeks and stuff like that, if you gain weight, your neck sizes change, you can see everything changes, your face changes. And so that affects the overall sleep apnea too as well. But that's why weight loss actually is a treatment for sleep apnea. It's actually as effective as a second line option, which is a mandibular or dental sleep apnea device. And so if you can sleep, if you have sleep apnea and you start to work on your weight, you lose 10% of your body weight, you can reduce your degree of sleep up to 50%, which is a lot just for weight management, right? Along with it, you get a lot of those cardiovascular metabolic benefits too as well, right? So that's kind of what happens as when we fall. So is this kind of with sleep apnea, or is this kind of fight or flight response? Or so when you start correcting this with the CPAP machines, the weight loss, dental devices, you allow your body to transition to the stages of sleep too as well, and allows you to have the adequate amounts of sleep. So one of the things Sam mentioned, is urination at nighttime. It's very interesting, right? Because we think as we get older, you should, you expect to, go up, pee up once or twice a night, right? It's a normal thing. It's actually not. We see a lot of patients from urology sent to us who, pee at nighttime, but have no urological problem, no big prostate, etc. Right? So, and so what happens is that there's a bit of a hormone that gets released when you have sleep apnea, and it makes you want to urinate, actually, whether there's a lot or not. So a lot of people say, well, I wake up and I go pee anyways. Well, yeah, maybe, but there's maybe a sensation that makes you want to go pee, right? And so, and the reason, we see that and we treat someone, it actually reduces it to 50% or more. And so if you pee at nighttime, it's also a sign of sleep apnea. So, what are some other signs of sleep apnea we want to be aware of, in terms of, maybe our family members or husband or wives and stuff like that. And so one of the most sensitive things is, most specific thing is that if you see your partner stop breathing, that's basic. They didn't stop breathing, they're actually choking, they're blocking the airway, and they do that, right? Now, the good thing is that the body is good at protecting itself. It will never let you die unless you have other things on board, like narcotics, cocaine, all that kind of stuff, or drugs, alcohol. Then you'll change your response to these apnea episodes. But the body will always, make them toss and turn, ruin your sleep, make you tired, and make you move. So when you move, you actually breathe better, and so they have very restless sleep. So that's the most specific sign. Snoring too, as well, is a good indicator. It's just a representation of resistance in the airway as airway collapses, where you have turbulent airflow. The other thing is excessive daytime tiredness or somnolence too as well, right? So adequate hours of sleep, 7 hours, 8 hours, you're still tired when you wake up in the morning. That's often a poor sign of, a good sign of sleep apnea. So those are the things that we consider when we look at, and there are other physical findings like tongue size, neck circumference too as well, right? That we also consider too as well. So how do you actually get a good night's sleep? You know what I mean? Like, what can you do to have a good night's sleep, whether you have sleep apnea or not, right? One is that you have to have a good sleep routine. I'm a 7.5 hour sleep guy. I know exactly how much I need to function the way I want to function. 7 hours, I can get by. I'm cheery. 7.5 hours, I'm like cloud nine, right? And the reason for that is I wake up the same time every morning. And so the most important thing to set your circadian rhythm is what time you get up, right? It has to be the same time every morning, every day, done for weeks and months on end, in order for you to know your circadian rhythm. And the body will tell you when you're drowsy, when you're sleepy, and that's when you go to bed. Anything beyond that, meaning you're going earlier than that, you're going to create some insomnia too as well. So if you want to change your circadian rhythm, you actually have to change your wake up time. Now, let's say if you want to wake up the same time but need more sleep, you don't just go and basically change an hour and a half earlier sleep. It's usually half an hour at a time. And what we do is we create a pressure to fall asleep, right? So the pressure to fall asleep basically is our own bodies wanting to fall asleep. So let's say you wake up one day morning and you're very tired because you slept at 1 in the morning. You got to get up at 6 o'clock, so you had a 5 hours sleep. So you have what we call sleep debt. So let's say you're an individual that needs 7 hours of sleep. So you lost 2 hours of sleep. So that's just sleep debt. Here's the problem with sleep debt. The problem with sleep debt is you can never repay it back in full. So what I mean by that is that, you sleep, let's say you go sleep 2 hours earlier, you're able to fall asleep. You actually don't gain, even though you sleep 2 hours, you don't gain all the quality of sleep. And so what I mean by that is one of the things that drives our circadian rhythm is your REM sleep. And so even though you sleep the extra 2 hours, you catch up some REM sleep, but not all. So I stay up, like, for example, if I do call overnight, I'll wake up around 5:15, and then I'll stay up all night most of the night. And then I'll work during the day, and I'll go sleep at 8 o'clock, 8:30. My bedtime is usually 9:30. So I have an extra hour of sleep. It takes you roughly almost 2 weeks to actually catch up your sleep per se, meaning that goes back to normal. At least a week to 2 weeks, right? But I never catch up all my REM sleep. So there's always a bit of chronic sleep debt, right? And so that's why it's so important for us to get our proper amounts of sleep, right? Because you never can fully catch up all your sleep. So one of the most important things in terms of sleep hygiene is waking up at the same time. Okay. What other things can we do? You have to have a sleep routine going to sleep. It's a behavioral thing, right? So what I mean is typically 2 hours before you want to go sleep, you have to start your ritual sleep, right? And that means initiating a routine that you do on a regular basis that trains the brain to get ready for sleep. And so when you hit the sack, you're actually turn the lights off. You're actually going to sleep. You don't turn on your phone. You don't talk to your wife or your partner that much and stuff like that. You might, small talk a little bit, but not like 20, 30 minutes. Try not to read. You should read outside of bed. So we use the bed for only two reasons: sleep and sex, right? So, once you're done those two, once you're done the first, you go to sleep, right? Whatever, right? So that's only that's how we train our brain to go to sleep, right? There's a few other things that you want to do. So the sleep environment, like as I mentioned, is very important too as well. And how important it is. Well, I mean, you've had, if you've are too cold, too hot, then you'll wake up too as well. If it's not dark, then you'll have some problem sleeping. Even actually, you have curtains and it's pretty dark, but you still see some light. That actually will affect the quality of sleep too as well, actually. So blackout curtains or like sleep masks are very important for that too as well. And the temperature of your room is very important. So ideally, it's about 17 degrees Celsius is good for that. The other thing, if you have short hair, might be a lot easier is a hot shower before sleep too as well, like half an hour before bed. That helps you transition to sleep, because what happens as we fall asleep, our core body temperature drops by half a degree to a degree Celsius. So when you take a hot shower, you vasodilate, and then when you basically come out of the shower, your body temperature starts to drop, and that kind of mimics that kind of transition to sleep too as well, right? And so some people will do that too. Being quiet obviously is important for sleep too as well. A lot of people have problems with having like monkey mind, right? Having a lot of thoughts, and that's a very common problem for insomnia. There's a couple of things that you can do. So one is that it's a behavioral thing. So one is that we always have thoughts. You can't get rid of your thoughts. And so if you want to get rid of thoughts and you're trying to get rid of thoughts completely, then you've already lost the game. What you don't want to do is dwell on the thoughts. You want to let the thoughts leave and pass through you when you have these thoughts. So if you're kind of an individual that worries a lot, you have to carve out some time, earlier in the day, not just before bed, but give yourself a good an hour to 2 hours before bed to write down all the things that might worry you. Write in a journal, and often that allows you to alleviate. And so what you do when you have thoughts of worries, well, hey, you know what? I've already thought about this. I've already written down. I'll check it tomorrow, right? The other thing that we do to help us learn to slow our mind down is through meditation or mindful breathing or mindfulness techniques too as well. And that can actually help you too as well, right? So some of the things that I do, because I use a CPAP, is I just focus on my breathing, and allows me to transition to sleep a lot easier. So if you can lower your actual breathing rate down to about 8 to 10, even 6, if you can really, it's really hard, by the way. What happens is that you slow your autonomic nervous system down. So you activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest nervous system. But if you do it long enough and you practice long enough, what happens is that your carbon dioxide starts to rise a little bit in your bloodstream. It's just a millimeter mercury. But CO2 or carbon dioxide is actually a natural tranquilizer, right? And so it relaxes us too as well, right? And so breathing technique as you lay in bed, relaxing, can be helpful too as well. Sometimes we have a difficulties recognizing when we're drowsy, and we have this second wind, we call it. That's because you missed your first one, right? You missed the first session of sleep. And typically, it follows our circadian rhythm and melatonin, right? And so, with respect to the melatonin, typically we have the first rise between around 8 to 10, and then another rise down the road. And so, if you fight that kind of first sleep and you overcome it, and then you kind of get a second one, and then 11 to 12 o'clock, some 1 o'clock, people tend to crash again. So one of the things that we do is you can't recognize sleep, is that we actually give a little bit of medication to induce that drowsiness. So I like to use melatonin, but I use very low dose. People use 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 milligrams of melatonin, and they take it just before bed. Well, melatonin doesn't work that way, right? Melatonin is not instant. It's not like Zopiclone that we take and knocks us out, right? Melatonin just helps your circadian rhythm. So what happens is as the sun starts to set, your melatonin starts to rises, and then it peaks, right? And then and it peaks as you're sleeping, and then it starts to wane down as the morning comes down, right? So that's how it works, right? And there's another molecule called Rexin that does the opposite. But what we use is 2 to 3 milligrams of melatonin about 2 hours before bed, right? And then we use it with I like to combine that with magnesium of 500, 800 milligrams. And that's a muscle relaxant and allows you to fall asleep. Or some people like to take a bath, Epsom salts, but magnesium is great. And so that's very relaxing too as well. And combining those two kind of can help you recognize the drowsiness, and allow you to maybe transition to sleep. But yeah, still want to, time when you take it. And so because most people need the 7 to 8 hours of sleep, just work backwards, from your wake up time on a regular basis, 7 to 8 hours, start with 7.5 hours, and go about 2 hours behind that. And then that's when you start to take the melatonin, and the magnesium, right? You might need to take it a little later if you're too drowsy and you start taking it, so move it half an hour at a time too as well. And when you want to correct your sleep time, only about half an hour, you want to go to sleep earlier, not an hour, and then transition. See how you feel when you get up in the morning at the same time. And it might take you several weeks before you actually recognize how much sleep you need. So those are some techniques that we use to help with quality sleep.
Yeah, you mentioned about that 30 minutes of adjustment time there. And I
Mhm.
want to go back to the sleep cycle. How long does a typical sleep cycle last for? Like when we go from one to, kind of find our way back
Yeah. So it's about an hour and a bit,
an
right?
hour and a bit.
So about
Okay.
an hour. It ranges, right? About an hour and a half and stuff like that. So yeah.
Because I've read different things over the past is when you're always trying to adjust that time is, you know, pushing the alarm or moving it back 5 minutes is not going to give you a big change or even 5 minutes earlier, but is to try and find that sweet spot in the cycle as much as possible. I don't know how you feel about that now, knowing it's an hour and a half. I'm not trying to
Yeah.
I think daylight savings are already going to change in an hour for
Yeah.
me coming up
Yeah.
soon,
Yeah.
but doesn't matter, for me right now, you talked about REM itself, and I remember a lot of my dreams, and it's because my alarm goes off. And I'm
Yeah.
guessing
So
I'm right in my REM cycle
yeah.
itself, and that's why
Yeah.
I remember them. But if I
Yeah.
were to weekends when I don't use my alarm clock, I
Yeah.
don't remember my dreams as much. But
Yeah. Yeah.
is that the appropriate time, would you say? Is there a specific adjustment or just kind of just start with 30 minutes? Just don't overthink, just kind of get it
Yeah.
adjust by 30
So
minutes.
good question. So you mean what time you go to bed?
Either way, morning or
Yeah.
wake up,
Yeah.
you're
So
talking more
yeah.
about keeping the morning consistent and
Yeah.
changing,
So
other.
there is differences, right? There is differences, okay? So a lot of us have a hard time getting up sometimes, right? You know what I mean? So that means you gotta look at your quality sleep, right? So let's say your quality sleep is good, and you wake, you set the alarm and you snooze 3 times. You're actually doing yourself a disservice. My wife does.
Yeah.
That just drives me nuts. It's like, why don't you just set up the time that you really, really have to get up, right? Because you want your REM sleep. The last part of the sleep is usually REM sleep. It's very, very like good sleep. So if you set your alarm like 30 minutes before and you're snoozing 3 times, and then you get up at the very last moment that will get you to work on time, you actually affect your quality of sleep. So,
Mhm.
so, so you should set it at kind of the last minute that you have to get up before you're late. You have to get to time. And you're forced to get up anyways because you're gonna be late. So so you don't get up, you're gonna be so it forces you just to spring out of bed, right? Which is better for you actually, right? Rather than disrupting your quality sleep. So some people will say to me, well, you know what, I'll wake up at 4 or 5 and then I'll stay up again. I can't fall asleep, and then I'll finally drift off to sleep. And it's like the best sleep of my life. It's like the best sleep of the night. That's because it's REM sleep, right? Because REM tends to be longer and more frequent. So the duration between REM stage of sleep are more in the latter part of the night, right? And so that's why. But going to falling asleep, half an hour early. It's really
Okay,
tough to
falling
go an
asleep.
hour early. So definitely half an hour transition time. Our actually circadian rhythm is over 24 hours, actually. It's not 24 hours. It's between
Mhm.
24 25 hours.
So the
Um,
snooze button is a disservice. It's
yeah,
not
yeah,
going
yeah,
to aid us, even though
yeah.
we're like, one,
Just,
five
just,
more minutes, 5 more
yeah,
minutes.
don't do that.
You're
Just
not
set
even
it
getting
five
into a
minutes
proper
later.
sleep
Just,
cycle.
just sit 5 minutes later and just get up, and you'll thank yourself. You'll feel a little better actually. And then what happens, you actually train yourself to actually do that. So that's the problem. Sleep is very behavioral too, right? Very, very behavioral.
I've only pushed snooze this week, previous weeks I've all just waking up and going,
Yeah.
it's come with practice and age, all these things. And it's just like, why am I waking up so early? But it's not so early. It's just not 10 a.m.
Yeah.
I can sleep forever. But it's nice to be able to wake up refreshed, and to find that cycle, but not to push snooze. Just get up. You're going to be more tired either way.
Hmm.
Keep on pushing it,
That's right.
making it harder there. Okay. It's why did they invent that button? Oh my gosh. So I wake up. There was something else I wrote down here as well.
If there's any questions, by all means, just
Yeah.
ask in the chat. So yeah.
My childhood mind was just kind of sitting there as, I've had many struggles of going to sleep. Once I'm asleep, I can just sleep forever. But some of my strategies early back in the day actually came from Sesame Street and Count Dracula of, counting sheep and jumping sheep. And
Mhm.
as silly as that motion is for me, it gives me a singular focus. That's the mindfulness there.
Yeah.
I don't count sheep specifically. I don't see sheep or count them, but
Yeah.
I actually go through a very rhythmic counting.
Mhm.
And it's only when I catch myself not counting that I may be on a thought or drifting
Mhm.
somewhere. If I notice I'm drifting, I won't count. But if it's kind of pulling me away and getting my
Mhm.
brain kind of pulling into another field,
Mhm.
I go back to counting back at number one again. But if it's
Mhm.
really affected me, that journal is necessary. I'm going to tell you my excuse, as I lay there and I've got these thoughts of, okay, tomorrow's project, let's write this, let's think about this in my brain. I'm like, just think about it longer. You won't forget it in the morning. Um, and then I'm like, well, write it down. And I go, well, if I write it down, I'm going to wake up. I'm going to wake up more. Really? Writing it down, I don't have to think about it again. It's actually shifted. Yeah, you may wake up because slightly more relaxing that you had laying down in bed, but huge benefits of getting it out there because you are going to tell yourself to remember or think about it or not think about it. Just dump it out, get rid of it there. But if anything, I want to thank Sesame Street for teaching me to be mindful and count through the sleep phase as it goes. But it doesn't work for everybody. But it's the style of mindfulness that could help you guys connect and just remember, get it out as much as possible. I sleep next to an individual in my home who has sleep apnea, moments there of holding breath and gasping and doing these things. And it's quite interesting. During his sleep phase, we could run a party in the house. We could do anything, get away with anything. We're a house full of girls. We can go and chat and gossip about daddy if we wanted to. But it's amazing to see his body responding to his gasp. Well, a big, huge hold for some time. I'm a nice wife. I do nudge him to breathe, but I can't do it all the time. But it's amazing to see his body wake up because his wake up response I can tell that he's going to stop because he starts grinding his teeth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's different things that actually occur within, and it's aggressive teeth
It's
grinding.
stress
Yeah, there's
response.
teeth that are missing now because of extensive teeth grinding, but I'm like, thank God that's happening right in there, because I can see the arousal happening as that goes on, and he'll change positions, or I'll push him over to roll him over on his side, because side sleeping for him is significantly different than laying on his back, where he has a short neck, different jawline, mouth's always open, so it falls back as that goes on. And, you know, we could throw all sorts of things into his mouth while he sleeps. But once again, I'm a nice wife. But, you know, over time, you know, as a nurse, working just in recovery and seeing sleep apnea moments, because I could watch their oxygen, and they weren't snoring, they weren't making noises, but I could see their oxygen drop. It's just funny to hear certain recommendations, because at that stage, we didn't work in sleep. It wasn't a sleep field. And some of the recommendations was actually sewing tennis balls to the back of shirts for these gentlemen, because if they roll over, they'll get uncomfortable. But I've got my husband at home, and I know it probably wouldn't work, because if he's in that much of a deep sleep, my kicking and nudging of him, he doesn't wake up. So a
Yeah.
tennis ball wouldn't necessarily do it. But there is different hacks and tricks and positions that are better suited for different individuals as they go. And I
Yeah.
think it
So
really
if there's
depends on
any,
the style of sleep apnea you have.
yeah, exactly. So if there's any concern from a sleep perspective, getting a sleep assessment obviously is the first thing
Mhm.
you should do, and to objectively identify the quality of
And
sleep and rule out anything that breathing difficulties during sleep. Right? Yeah.
And we've just started here, and our clinic is actually doing home sleep tests itself. So we're able to assess your sleep and have a look at that with you guys
Mhm.
as well, but at the comfort of your home. No
Mhm.
strings or cords attached. And it pulls out beautiful data that I do get Dr. Lee to read for you guys, and go through and give reports. So you're able to see the status of, you know, for our patients itself, well, do you have sleep apnea, and what does it look like today? But after weight management and weight loss and you know, sleep training, all these things that go in, is to redo it again, and we can actually see some good changes that are occurring, especially from weight loss itself,
Mhm.
where fat mass is being changed in the neck, the face, the tongue, with those obstructions as well. So it's actually been quite significant here, and very accessible and easy to do. That, you know, there's no hospital stay, not stay, but overnight sleep, as you go, but it's in your environment of how you sleep and what you're doing. So we've had lots of fun with these, and you know, Dr. Lee, I'm hoping you're enjoying doing them as well, because we've had a significant intake of those. So they're available to you guys as well, to our public out there as well, if you ever are querying, because you know, you don't see yourself sleep, you don't hear yourself sleep. It's typically others that will tell you. But Dr. Lee, what are the questions you ask patients there? I know we're right on the time, but
Yeah.
dry mouth, what
Yeah.
are those things?
Yeah. So
I don't want to spit them out, but
well,
there's
yeah.
about
So
four or
so
five
so
things.
snoring, right? So they know they're snoring, or sometimes they're snoring. We ask about dry mouth in the morning, so your mouth breathers, right? So you don't have to have a nasal obstruction, but what happens, you can generate more air in your throat when you have a obstruction, so that's why you mouth breathe. Patients will have headaches in the morning. People might have a raw, sore, fullness sensation in the throat too as well. We ask about whether they stop breathing or gasp for air. Right? Sometimes you can actually hear yourself snoring, or feel yourself snoring too, when you in this kind of wakefulness slash sleep transition stages. We ask about daytime tiredness, debility, brain fog in the morning, grogginess in the morning too as well. And we ask about, usually we ask about, weight gain, changes, weight fluctuation too as well. We ask about their tonsils, whether you have had tonsillectomy stuff, because sometimes large tonsils are the culprits for that. People have nasal obstruction or difficulties breathing through the nose, as well, right? And so we dive into that history, allergy history. If you're congested throughout the nighttime, you'll definitely breathe through your mouth for sure. It's just a protective mechanism, and you'll have an increased risk of sleep apnea as soon as you open your mouth to breathe. Right? It's just a natural gravity thing. So those are the some of the things we ask.
My husband can fall asleep standing up, and there's never any movie time.
Mhm.
He sits down, right out, but never good sleep as that goes on.
Mhm.
So I just want to thank you all for coming in and visiting with us over this hour. If there's any questions about sleep or, how we could help you, please reach out as you go. But thanks for coming to our open discussion, How Clinics Open Discussion. Next week, not next week, please, not next week. It's going to be next month, the last Wednesday of the month again. We're going to talk about ultra processed foods itself and what it does to our body, our cells, and to our weight and to our health as that goes on. I'm really interested in this one because it's not just going to be talking about, don't eat these products because, they're things that we know. I want to kind of dive a little bit deeper of what is convincing you why we shouldn't do it a little bit more as we go. So
Mhm.
take care, guys. I hope you have a great Halloween tomorrow as well. And good luck with the time change coming up this week. Um, I don't love time changes, but we'll deal with it. Good luck to my patients. I hopefully will be nice and bright and cheery at that time. But take care and we'll see you guys soon.
Have a good night.